Have you ever wondered why certain people always seem drawn to your life? The ones who leave you emotionally drained, entangled in arguments you never meant to have, questioning your own balance long after they've gone. It feels almost personal, as if chaos itself can sense you from across the room. But here's a quieter truth, one the Stoics understood deeply. What if the real problem isn't what they bring, but what you still make space for? There are those who walk through life untouched by toxicity, not because they resist harder, but because they radiate something different. Their presence no longer answers the call of dysfunction. This transformation does not come from fighting others. It comes from mastering yourself, from becoming so inwardly aligned, so still in your values, that what once disturbed you no longer finds a home in you. In this video, we are not chasing tactics. We are returning to principle, to the kind of inner clarity that makes toxic energy lose interest. If you're tired of the same emotional patterns, of giving your peace away one reaction at a time, stay with me. What comes next may not be loud, but it just might free you. 1. The inner shift that breaks toxic cycles. Most people believe boundaries begin with confrontation, with bold words, with walking away. But the Stoics knew better. The true boundary, the one that lasts, is not drawn outside of you. It's built within, and it is not a line. It is a presence. It is a way of being. You don't need to raise your voice or rehearse responses. What you need is a quiet shift. An internal decision that you no longer trade your peace for validation, that you no longer perform emotional labor for people committed to misunderstanding you. The Stoics didn't preach about changing others. They mastered themselves. Marcus Aurelius never asked for better people. He asked for better control over his own mind. Epictetus didn't obsess over how to silence critics. He focused on not being moved by their noise. Toxic people aren't random. They're drawn to signals in your energy, your need to explain yourself, your discomfort with silence, your fear of being misunderstood. These are not flaws. They are unhealed instincts. But when you begin to respond differently, when you stop reacting to every trigger, something changes. Not around you, within you. Your nervous system begins to rest. Your thoughts become clearer. You stop confusing chaos for connection. You realize that calm is not weakness. It is a strategy, a signal to the world that you are no longer available for dysfunction. Imagine someone who once rattled you with a single comment. Now they try, and nothing happens. You do not flinch. You do not defend. You do not seek closure. That silence, that neutrality, that internal stability, it speaks louder than any speech you could have given. And that's the shift. Not in your personality, but in your availability. You are no longer someone they can reach with confusion, because you've become coherent, integrated. You know your worth and no longer need it echoed in someone else's behavior. This is how toxic cycles die, not with an argument, but with a nervous system that no longer responds to provocation. And so the real question is not, why are toxic people drawn to me? It is, what unhealed part of me is still making space for them? That question demands courage, not blame, Not shame, just ownership. And once you answer it honestly, you begin to live differently. You no longer explain your peace, you embody it. And those who once fed on your chaos, they disappear. Not because you pushed them away, but because they can no longer find you. You've outgrown the version of you they were drawn to. You didn't just set a boundary, you became one. And in that stillness, you didn't just survive, you reclaimed yourself. What you focus on, you become. There is a quiet but profound truth, echoed by both Stoic philosophy and modern neuroscience. What you repeatedly give your attention to, you become. Seneca warned that the person who allows their mind to be pulled in every direction loses themselves before they ever lose a battle. Neuroscience confirms this with the principle of neuroplasticity, showing that the brain physically rewires itself around the thoughts and experiences it encounters most. So, if your attention is habitually fixed on toxic people, on their judgments, their moods, their manipulation, you are quite literally programming your brain to live inside that chaos. You condition your nervous system to anticipate harm even when the room is silent. Your body flinches at shadows because it was trained by storms. But this is not a flaw in you. It is the natural response of a mind that has been exposed to chronic instability. The nervous system adapts not to what is fair, but to what is frequent. And here lies the moment of power. Once you recognize that attention is not just something that drifts, but something you can direct, you take the first step toward liberation. You reclaim the lever. And when you begin to turn that lever inward to shift focus back to your breath, your thoughts, your posture, your values, your discipline, a quiet transformation begins. One not born from resistance, but from sovereignty. You are no longer the audience to their drama. You are the architect of your stillness. To the Stoics, coherence was not perfection, it was alignment. When your reason, your principles, and your behavior are in harmony, you become internally ordered. You decide when to speak, when to remain silent, when to stay, and when to walk away. Not from emotion, but from clarity. And once you arrive at this place, toxic people lose their grip. Not because you shouted them away, but because your energy no longer invites them in. They simply cannot reach you where you now dwell. It is tempting to think that peace comes from removing people, but the Stoics would remind you, it is not about who you eliminate. It is about what you no longer feed. Their manipulation thrives on reaction. But if you stop rewarding it with attention, it dies quietly. Not with confrontation, but with indifference. And as this inner shift deepens, your nervous system resets. Your instincts no longer search for threat. Your soul no longer apologizes for peace. And those who once drained you begin to fade, not because they changed, but because you did. In the end, you do not escape chaos by fighting it. You escape by starving it. You stop attending battles that were never yours. You stop offering your clarity to those who are addicted to confusion. And in that refusal, you find what the Stoics called true freedom. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of power, a power that lives entirely within you. 3. Let silence shield your strength. In a world that praises reaction, silence is often mistaken for weakness. We're taught to defend ourselves, to clarify, to confront. But the Stoics saw things differently. To them, silence was not retreat. It was refinement. A sign that you no longer hand over your energy to every disturbance that demands your attention. When someone tries to provoke you, your nervous system prepares for conflict. Your body tenses, your focus narrows. You're not responding from wisdom, you're reacting from survival. But in that very moment, you have a choice. You can speak from impulse, or you can pause. And in that pause, something powerful happens. Your breath slows, your mind clears, you return to yourself. That pause is not suppression, it is sovereignty. It is the moment your silence becomes a boundary, one that needs no announcement. Most believe boundaries must be spoken to be respected, but the strongest boundaries are felt, not heard. When you choose silence rooted in clarity, you become unreadable to those who once fed on your reactivity. You no longer flinch, you no longer explain, you no longer play the game. This is emotional discipline. It is not coldness, it is clarity. It is knowing that not every battle is yours, that peace is not passive, but fiercely protected. The Stoics called it strength under pressure. Epictetus taught that we should listen twice as much as we speak, not just to others, but to ourselves. So the next time chaos invites you in, say nothing. Let your breath be your answer. Let your stillness close the door. Because real power doesn't shout. It stays calm. And in that calm, toxic people lose interest. Not because you resisted them, but because you stopped being accessible. That is the quiet armor of a Stoic. Not louder, just untouchable. 4. When you align, chaos can't stay. There is an invisible language we all speak, and it says more than our words ever could. It is the language of breath, posture, stillness, and presence. Long before you open your mouth, your nervous system is already in conversation with the world. And the signals you emit do not vanish. They are read, felt, and mirrored back by others. Modern neuroscience calls it mirror neurons. The Stoics called it resonance with nature. But the message is the same. When your internal world is unsettled, chaotic people will feel invited. When you are anxious, reactive, or emotionally porous, you become fertile ground for disorder. This is not a curse. It is simply attraction by frequency. But alignment changes everything. Not alignment with trends or with others' opinions, but alignment within. The moment you begin living from your principles, calming your breath, mastering your impulses, choosing your responses rather than reacting from habit, something profound occurs. The frequency you broadcast changes, and the people who thrive on instability, on drama, on manipulation, begin to lose their grip. Not because you attacked them, but because they no longer recognize your signal. This is not magic. It is physiology. When you regulate your nervous system, when you train your body to be still and your mind to be focused, you break the feedback loop that chaos depends on. You no longer flinch at insults. You no longer rush to explain. You no longer get pulled into every emotional tide. And without the reaction they feed on, toxic people drift away. Not in defeat, but in disinterest. There is simply nothing left for them to hold on to. This is where true boundaries begin. Not with confrontation, but with coherence. Your silence becomes your message. Your calm becomes your protection, and your presence begins to repel what is no longer in harmony with who you are. That is not a rejection of others. It is the evolution of self. When you live in alignment, you no longer need to push anyone out. The ones who no longer match your energy will exit on their own. You won't need to fight for peace. You will become it, and the world will respond accordingly. 5. Protect your lane. Preserve your power. There is a quiet strength in choosing to stay in your lane, especially in a world that celebrates noise, interference, and emotional entanglement. The Stoic path invites you inward. The most powerful kind of influence is not the one that controls others, but the one that masters the self. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that we are disturbed not by events, but by our judgments about them. And one of the clearest judgments we can revise is this: not everything requires our involvement. Every morning you wake up with a limited amount of mental energy, and each time you spend it obsessing over someone else's choices, decoding their tone, or adjusting yourself to win their approval, you abandon your own center. You do not lose time, you lose direction. The very energy meant to build your peace is now leaking into someone else's chaos. And over time, this becomes more than just distraction. It becomes identity erosion. Biologically, your attention shapes your reality. The more you focus on what drains you, the more your nervous system learns to associate stimulation with stress. But shift that focus inward, toward your habits, your breath, your choices, and the pattern begins to reverse. You stop chasing approval. You start creating progress. You stop managing dysfunction. You start mastering clarity. That shift reprograms your emotional experience. What once thrilled you now bores you. What once triggered you now passes unnoticed. The same people who once ruled your mind no longer enter your awareness. Not because they changed, but because you evolved. This is the essence of Stoic discipline. Not loud resistance, but quiet refusal. Not endless confrontation, but radical redirection. The practice of oikeiosis, aligning with what is truly yours, means bringing your focus home. You no longer overreach. You no longer overreact. You become too present for pettiness to reach you. And this too is supported by psychology. Through selective attention, your brain naturally filters out what no longer matches your priorities. When you build a life around growth and restraint, you stop noticing drama. You stop hearing the bait. You stop engaging battles that have nothing to do with your path. So protect your lane, not to escape others, but to preserve yourself. Peace is not given, it is constructed, choice by choice, silence by silence. And when you finally become more loyal to your purpose than to the noise around you, you'll realize something powerful. You were never meant to manage the storm. You were meant to become the calm within it. 6. If it costs your peace, it's too expensive. Peace is not a poetic luxury, it is a physiological necessity. Chronic stress, as modern neuroscience confirms, degrades everything it touches: your memory, your immune system, your clarity, your sleep, even the rate at which you age. And the most persistent source of this erosion often hides behind a familiar face: unstable relationships. The kind that force you to scan every silence for danger. The kind that make you walk on eggshells, waiting for the next jab. The Stoics would not call this love or loyalty. They would call it misalignment, because nothing that constantly violates your peace is worth preserving. When your nervous system is repeatedly exposed to unpredictability, it adapts, not with strength, but with hypervigilance. You stop thinking clearly. You start bracing for impact. You forget what calm feels like. That is why protecting your peace is not passive. It is an act of deliberate self-respect. And the protection begins not with confrontation, but with clarity. Knowing what you are no longer willing to carry. Knowing when to walk away without rage, without regret, simply because your sanity is sacred. Stoic wisdom teaches us to guard the mind with discipline. To recognize that while we cannot always control the chaos outside, we can absolutely choose whether we step into it. And more often than not, the most powerful move is to step back. To let go of the need to explain, to fix, to absorb what was never yours. Because the moment you begin valuing your peace more than your proximity to dysfunction, everything starts to shift. It begins internally. Conversations that once triggered you now feel hollow. Conflicts that once consumed you now feel beneath you. You no longer offer your attention as a currency to buy stability from unstable people. Instead, you invest that energy inward. You calibrate your environment. You tighten your circle. You stop making room for what repeatedly drains you, and those who once pulled you into their emotional theater will notice the change, not because you made a declaration, but because the script they relied on no longer works. You don't respond the way you used to. You don't argue for your worth. You don't stay to be understood. You've chosen to be still instead of reactive. Grounded instead of entangled, clear instead of available. So when someone asks what changed, let your stillness speak. Let your absence from their drama be your answer. Not from bitterness, but from evolution. Because peace is not something you wait for, it is something you build. And once built, it becomes the filter that protects everything sacred within you. 7. Transform quietly, rise invisibly. True transformation does not announce itself. It does not crave applause or beg to be recognized. The deepest kind of change, the one that reshapes your character, not just your habits, happens in silence. Far from the spotlight, away from noise and performance. This is not just philosophy, it is neuroscience. Your brain rewires itself through repetition, attention, and space, and that space must be protected. Space from distraction, space from chaos, space from the people who benefit most from the weaker version of you. From the Stoic perspective, silence is not escape, it is refinement. Marcus Aurelius wrote for his own mind, not for an audience. Seneca urged us to master ourselves before we try to teach others. The stillness they spoke of is not the absence of sound, it is the absence of pressure to explain, the freedom from performing your progress, and the courage to mature in private. When you step away from environments that provoke reactivity, your nervous system exhales, the silence becomes fertile. No longer preoccupied with decoding tension, your mind begins to sharpen. You gain clarity. You see not only others more clearly, but also yourself. And in that clarity, change begins to take root. It can be tempting to publicize the early stages of growth, to show the world you are changing. But the truth is, exposure invites judgment, and judgment disrupts development. If you still feel the urge to defend the new you, it has not fully taken root. Let your growth settle in silence. Let your new rhythm stabilize in solitude. Not because you are hiding, but because you are becoming. As this new identity forms, toxic people may feel the shift. Not because they are intuitive, but because their control begins to slip. They may try to pull you back with old patterns, bait you with familiar tactics. That is why your silence must be sacred. Not a tactic, but a vow. A vow to protect your becoming. A commitment to build strength before testing it. A promise to choose stillness over explanation. And then, with time, everything changes. You no longer speak your transformation. You embody it. You no longer argue with chaos. You outgrow it. The ones who used to provoke you can no longer find you, not because you built walls, but because you built depth. You now move with presence, not performance, and that presence speaks a language only the disciplined understand. So remain in the silence. Let it sharpen you. Let it raise you. And when the time comes, you won't have to say a word. The life you've built will speak for itself. 8. Speak less, show more. There is a quiet intelligence within the mind known as salience detection. It is how your brain filters what is loud but irrelevant and draws your attention to what is quiet but real. People do this too. Over time, they stop listening to what you say and begin observing how you live. They no longer respond to declarations of change. They respond to the consistency of your presence. And this is the essence of power, not in explanation, but in embodiment. When you begin rising from toxic environments, the most powerful shift is not confrontation, it is coherence. You stop announcing your growth, you start aligning your behavior. When your habits match your values, when your silence carries the weight of clarity, people sense it. Not because you told them, because they feel the strength in your restraint. That is the power of congruence, and it speaks louder than any words ever could. Modern neuroscience supports this truth. Every time you act in alignment with your integrity, whether it's walking away from unnecessary conflict or committing to a personal discipline, your brain rewards you. Dopamine reinforces that choice. Not just as a task completed, but as a deeper message. This is who you're becoming. You build identity not through promises, but through repetition. You become trustworthy to yourself. Toxic people do not fear your words. They feed on your contradictions. They thrive in the space between what you say and what you do. When you break that pattern, when your actions become quiet and decisive, their access fades. They cannot provoke clarity. They cannot manipulate someone who no longer offers ambiguity. This is where Stoicism reveals its sharpest wisdom. Do not explain your philosophy. Embody it. Let your conduct carry the message. Let your stillness unsettle those who once controlled you through reaction. Let your presence be your answer to anyone who wonders whether you've changed. And here is the result. The wrong people will drift, not because you rejected them, but because they can no longer reach the version of you that no longer entertains the chaos. And the right people, those anchored in self-mastery, will recognize what you have become. They will be drawn to your discipline, not your declarations. So speak less, show more, build quietly, and let your transformation rise in such silence that only the honest will understand it. In the end, what matters is not what you say you are. It is what your life says when you are no longer trying to be heard. 9. Master yourself, and the world bows quietly. At the core of both neuroscience and Stoic philosophy lies one profound principle: coherence. It is the state where your thoughts, emotions, and actions no longer pull in different directions. They move together. They move with purpose. And when this internal harmony is reached, something powerful happens. Your nervous system settles. Your mind becomes clear. Your decisions grow firm. You stop searching for peace in the outside world because you finally located it within. This mastery is not loud. It is not something you display. It is something you become. Every time you choose clarity over chaos, composure over reaction, and truth over performance, you reinforce your foundation. That consistency forms an inner structure no insult can shake. And from that structure, everything shifts. The people who once fed on your reactivity begin to fall away. Not because you resisted them, but because you stopped giving them a place to land. The Stoics taught that the truly free man is not the one who conquers others, but the one who governs himself. When you reach that level of self-governance, the world around you adjusts, not out of fear, but out of respect. You stop chasing energy that does not match your values. You stop participating in stories that do not reflect your growth. And by doing less, you become more. The path to peace was never about defeating chaos. It was about no longer resonating with it. When you rise in silence, you don't lose people. You lose illusions. And what remains is real. What remains is yours. So master yourself. Let your alignment speak louder than your resistance, because when your spirit is steady, the noise fades on its own. And in that stillness, the world bows, not in submission, but in recognition. Peace isn't something you chase. It is what remains when you stop feeding what drains you. So choose stillness, live in quiet alignment, and let the rest fall away on its own. If this spoke to you, feel free to subscribe and stay connected. Comment below. Own your peace. Your next breakthrough might be one quiet decision away.